Welcome to We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only show dedicated to the process and strategies for transforming apartment buildings to thriving communities. I am your host, John Brackett, and welcome to the show. All right, folks, welcome to another great episode of We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only place where you come to learn how to take apartment buildings and turn them into amazing communities. So I am your host, John Brackett. I have another great guest, and his name is Anthony Angotti. I got that right?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, awesome, man. Hey, really excited to have you on. So I want to introduce you to our guest. I'm going to invite them into the show by introducing you. So this is going to be a cool show, man, because I always love it when we have conversations with, operators, but that are doing something maybe a little bit different than what some of the traditional operators are doing. And I think you kind of fit that category. So really excited to get into this conversation. So Anthony is a realtor and a real estate investor that got started by purchasing a duplex, living in one side, renting out the other, quote unquote, house hacking. I hear that all the time, so I had to say that, man. All right.
It's the buzzword of the day.
It's the buzzword. Yeah, it's the buzzword. So, quote unquote, house hacking. So he continues to purchase real estate and works with investors to do the same. So he currently hosts the real estate investing podcast, Be Free Real Estate. Did I get that right, man?
Be Free RE. Yeah.
Oh, Be Free RE. Okay, cool. So Tony has grown his real estate holdings to nearly 100 units, which are managed by his own in-house team, and focuses on buying small to mid-sized apartment buildings. So when he isn't working on real estate, he enjoys hockey, backcountry camping, I like that, learning new things, and exercising as much as he possibly can. So he and his wife still live in a duplex and consider house hacking to be the cheat code to financial independence. So I like that, man. I like the summary. So hey, bud, welcome to the show.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Hey, so share your story with us. Let's start there.
Yeah. So basically we got started, like the bio says, house hacking a duplex. We owner occupied it. We lived there. That was kind of our introduction. Being a landlord wasn't too bad. So from there we did a couple more places that way. And then along the way, being a realtor, at the time I was just a part-time realtor, but I had a couple customers who were from out of state. Pittsburgh is a pretty affordable market compared to some of the more expensive markets like your New York, California. One of my business partners is from Hawaii, so a lot cheaper than Hawaii. And they were interested in more partnering rather than just working together as an agent. So after some conversations, we started to get into one small apartment building and then a few single family homes at the time. And then that, in addition to working up my realtor business, I quit my full-time job at I was in quality assurance for a pharmaceutical company. So I kind of oversaw the clean room. I had my master's degree in biology, so not at all close to real estate. I was a science guy.
That's cool.
Never went to college assuming I would get into real estate. Just eventually didn't, as my career went on, didn't really want to be working for someone else. My wife introduced me to the Bigger Pockets podcast that put the idea of house hacking in my head, and then everything kind of grew organically from that.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Really appreciate you sharing that. So, hey, I heard a couple of things. One of the things that stood out was partnering, right? The folks that you're working with now, it sounds like you said they wanted to partner, and I don't think purchase through you, but partner with you. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I have two main partnerships. One, the person is in Hawaii. He was the first one that I started partnering with. And basically what happened was he was looking remote. There aren't a ton of great property managers in Pittsburgh. There's not anybody that I would really describe as like excellent. There's people who are adequate, but there's nobody that's excellent at property management. I don't know that those two words really go together nationwide. So he was looking for kind of boots on the ground to help him find sort of more like value add type buildings than more just being publicly listed and somebody that could kind of execute the strategy. And just after talking, I was already doing that with my few buildings that I had, and we kind of went that way because I didn't have, on my end, I didn't really have the money, but I had sweat equity side, and then a little bit of knowledge. I was an agent already, so it made sense. And then my other group of partners, they're from California, and it was the same sort of story. They were looking for somebody to kind of do the work, boots on the ground sort of thing. I didn't really have a ton of money. So there was a synergy there as far as somebody to be on the ground, do the work, and then somebody to be kind of funding things. At least that's how it started.
Okay, cool. So talk about maybe some of the deals that you did under that structure and how they worked out. Kind of what were some of the things that you learned from that, and maybe some of the challenges along the way.
Yeah, we actually, there weren't a ton of like catastrophic challenges or things that came up, but like any partnership, you wonder, like, both people have to be doing something. Like, you can't have a totally unbalanced partnership, and you kind of need to know who's doing what. So the partnership from Hawaii and we divided it up really easy. We just said, okay, anything that needs to be done in person, Tony will do. And anything that can be done remotely, like managing the books and all that stuff, my partner from Hawaii would do. And just setting that up that way made it so that we really didn't we didn't question so much what the other person was doing. We were aware to make sure that each other wasn't doing anything, unfair to the other person. But by giving each partner kind of the flexibility to make the decisions in their area, we really didn't get into many arguments, which was positive. Lately was pretty easy in that respect. We did, that group I started out with, we did 2 single family homes. We were doing the BRRRR strategy, which is that buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat, another buzzword of the day, so to speak. We did one.
It sounds like BRRRR sounds like, when I first heard that, I thought it was like a laundry detergent, man.
Yeah, it's basically
rinse, repeat, rehab.
Yeah, more or less.
Where are you washing your laundry, man?
They come in pods.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no. So we did one successfully, and then while we were purchasing the other one, I had an opportunity I had actually just put in notice at my job to leave my day job because my realtor business had kind of picked up. And while I was leaving, one of my coworkers, I always tell everyone that I talk about real estate, like, you can't be a secret real estate investor. In the realtor world, they say, don't be a secret agent. You need to tell everyone that you know what you're doing.
I like that.
And same thing for investing. You need to tell everyone that you know what you're doing. And I told everyone, like, hey, this is what's working for me. I'm an agent. I'm investing. This is, why I'm leaving. I don't hate it here. I'm pursuing that. And one of my coworkers, he said he had an apartment building that he was looking to maybe move out of one day. And I just said, okay, we'll keep the line of communication open. If you ever look to sell it, let me see it before you make a decision, and maybe I'll offer. And then a few months later, he reached back out to me and just said, hey, we're ready to sell. The building was in decent shape, but this was something that my partner from Hawaii and we were thinking about getting into multifamily, just because the economy of scale with trying to do like one house, even with the BRRRR strategy, and keep the money moving. It's just a lot of effort for one unit, basically. And I think dollar for dollar, you can kind of get sometimes a higher return on the single family homes, because the owners are oftentimes more motivated. You can find more motivated sellers, that type of thing, but you're just always running around from place to place, and you can't really pool your energy and your effort into one building. So we are looking to get out of that strategy and move more towards multifamily. And we bought this place. We did partial seller finance, partial bank financing on that building. And when we purchased it, the rents they were basically half of what market rent was. So our idea was to basically do the BRRRR strategy on the multifamily property, which is where it came from anyway. Until somebody put a big a nice little acronym on it. That's where the idea came from. So that happened. And then around the same time, my other partners wanted to do multifamily as well. We found some opportunities. I could go into detail on any particular deal, but that's the general structure.
Okay, sweet. So how many units was that deal that you just described?
It was 10 units.
Okay.
So it was, it's basically like, it's kind of like, you talk about building apartment communities. It's almost like a little complex, like a little community. There's a single family house, a 4-unit and a 5-unit all on the same plot. So, it's 10 units, but they're 3 separate structures on the one piece of land.
Okay. And then, so now your comment was, hey, I focus on small to medium-sized apartment buildings. So talk to us about one of the medium-sized projects that you have either completed or are working on now, just so that we can have a couple different perspectives, right? So there's the 10 unit that you started off with, and I'm sure you've worked on a couple others along the way. So can you share maybe one more example, and then we'll kind of get into some questions and just walk through the cycle of an apartment building.
Yeah, we can go through one that I'm doing now, but in Pittsburgh, the biggest, there are a few large buildings, but in my market, and we stay local, we don't try to invest across the country or do anything like that. We keep our team, that's our niche, is the Pittsburgh market. But most of the buildings here are going to be between 5 and 20 units. That's just most of the stock. It's not like, in Ohio, for instance, you see big, like 100 plus 50 unit buildings, which some people would consider medium. To me, small was like 5 to 10, and medium for my market's like 10 to 30, I guess. Right. But what we focus on is all value add buildings. So one of the buildings that we're doing now is actually right at the bottom of the street from where I live. And that one is 12 units. So, I don't know if you have any specific questions maybe to guide it, but I could go through the numbers if you want.
Yeah. So let's do this. Let me, I'm happy to guide us through that. So let's talk a little bit about the numbers. When you first started underwriting this thing, what did the numbers look like? And then what was the strategy? And then we'll just walk through the cycle.
So the numbers of purchase, we paid around I want to say we paid around like a 10 cap for the building, somewhere like that. But it's the buildings.
Was that an in-place 10 cap, or was that what you were projecting?
That was what we were projecting out. The in-place ones, to be honest, since we do value add type stuff, and we're generally not planning on even keeping the tenants that are there. They're all going to be, not renewed when their leases are up. We're not typically even looking at the purchase numbers that closely, because for our strategy, they're not really that, important. The building was around cash flow neutral at purchase. So we weren't really making any money. We weren't losing any money. If we would have just kept the building, it would have just been flat. But it's in like a B plus type neighborhood, which is where I live.
Okay. So when you're underwriting this thing, what stood out to you about the property that caught your interest to where you felt that, hey, now there's an opportunity here?
Right. So the easiest thing that we look for in most of these properties, and we saw in this particular one, is just rents below market rent. So each of the 12 units had, other than one of them was at market rent, but the other 11 were anywhere between $100 and $150 under where the market rent was now. So if you add that up over the whole building, that's a lot of value, that you can add in property value to eventually refinance our money out. In addition to that, what we've kind of been specializing in lately has been buildings that have common heat. So where the landlord pays the gas for the heat of the building, we've been separating all that out. It's a fairly large project, but the heat expense for a building like this is around, you're looking at probably like around $1,000 a month in feed expense.
Is that a boiler market for those type of product? Is that product type? Okay.
Yeah. So almost all of our buildings that we've done this strategy with, including this one we're talking about, they have a central boiler, and that heat to the whole building, all the 12 units. And what we've been doing is removing the central boiler. Sometimes we'll leave it in place and just turn it off. And we put in wall-mounted heat and air conditioning units. So then not only are you improving the unit by adding air conditioning to the building, but you're also heating it through an electric system. And then you pass that electric cost on to the tenants. So now the tenants are paying for their heat versus you paying for their gas to heat their apartment.
Sure. So are you using splits?
Yeah, mini splits.
Okay. Interesting. So now when you say you're passing that on to them, does that mean that you're also metering those units?
Most of the buildings that we've bought have already been sub-metered for electric. So they already have the meters for the electric. But the sub-metering of the electrical is not really too much of a concern expense-wise, because in a lot of these buildings we're doing electrical work anyway, because with the market, almost everything is at least 80 years old. So you're talking a lot of knob and tube type electrical, and we're usually doing a significant amount of electrical work anyway. So even if we had to sub-meter the buildings, the added expense wouldn't be something that would break it for us.
Interesting. Yeah, no, you're right about that, right? Because if you're going in and you're adding mini splits, there's some electrical requirements anyway. So interesting. So what made you go down that path, right? Versus just keeping the boilers in place, maybe updating the boilers, because there's some pretty good products out there, for that, and then just charging back for, doing an allocation for that and charging that back.
Yeah, so to do like a utility assessment on a smaller apartment building usually isn't that cost effective. I mean, it's fairly expensive to do like a RUBS analysis on a property. And for us to go and do to hire somebody to do that properly would be somewhat difficult. Additionally, the cost to replace the boiler in a building this size is not that much cheaper than just splitting it all out on mini splits, especially considering the electrical needs to be updated anyway. And on top of that, the mini splits allow us to add air conditioning, which then lets us charge more rent as well. So there's a bunch of different.
And so how much were the mini splits roughly per unit with the electrical install? Or maybe just break out the equipment first and then the insulation plus the electrical.
Yeah, so I believe the mini splits are around $5,500 per apartment. They are one bedroom apartments. They're fairly large 1-bedroom apartments. So you need these apartments need 3 heads, so 3 parts where they blow the air out. The electrical work for the building was $36,000.
That's a pretty expensive install, man, for equipment for mini splits. How big is the apartment building?
Okay, what market are you in again? Sorry.
San Diego.
Okay, so that may be the reason. So in Pennsylvania, you need the hyper heat models, they're called, because if you buy standard heat pump mini splits, when the temperature drops below where it can drop in Pittsburgh, the standard ones will just shut off, so they won't even work. So if you buy like the more standard ones, they're like half the cost. But in Pittsburgh, you need to buy the ones that work in the lower temperature.
Interesting. Man, that's a pretty expensive install for mini splits. That's really surprising. But hey, goes to show different markets, right? Different markets, different price, different requirements. So what else did you do? Yeah, no, it is what it is, man. So what else did you do to that building? I mean, what were some of the other improvements that you made that you felt added a significant amount of value for you to be able to command those higher projected rents?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, this is the one that we're doing now, so we're not done. But additionally, the people, cosmetically updating the units, so they're dated. standard stuff that our company will usually do. Like we'll rip out the carpets, refinish the floors, or put the vinyl plank in. We'll redo the countertops and the cabinets and things like that. Just basic, making it nicer, that sort of thing.
And how many units was or is that project?
Only one of the 12 units is currently where it should be. So there's 11 units that need to be renovated. Yes.
Okay. Awesome, man. Okay. So now we're going to get into some fun stuff, right? So, man, you've been kind enough to give an example of a 10-unit project that you initially purchased and walked through that. And then now something that you're actually working on right now. So this is going to be awesome, right? And you're doing fairly for a small property like that HVAC system. I mean, it's fairly expensive, man, right? I mean, you're talking $6,000 per unit. I mean, I understand that it's a colder market, and that's just a requirement. So consequently, there's just more requirements, right? More demand for that product. Consequently, price a little bit higher. I totally get that. But that's no small improvement for that small property, right? So likely in that market, HVAC, like in many markets, is usually one of the bigger improvements that you're making, one of the more costly improvements outside of course, your roofing system, right? Depending on how you're installing that. So here's where the fun starts, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about process, okay, to create efficiency, because when you're purchasing an apartment building and you have a good plan, right, to be able to execute is where you make your money, right? So you bought this thing, you had a plan for how you're going to add value to it. And of course, your comment was, hey, look, if we hit these projections, roughly probably a 10 cap once we stabilize the property, assuming that we're going to hit these projections. So let's start by backing into this, right? So what are some of the things that will prevent you from hitting your projections? So when you were thinking through your business plan, what were the top 3 things that you said, okay, these are the biggest challenges that we can potentially run into, and here's how we're going to mitigate against these challenges?
You mean just on this specific building?
Just on this one,
some things that came up.
Since it's live, right? Since you're already going through it.
Yeah, right. So a few things whenever we do a project like this is just you look kind of at feasibility of actually placing the units, because sometimes depending on how the building is situated, there might not even be a place really for you to conveniently put them. Or you also have things like permits where if you can't put, like some areas don't want you to have tubes on the outside of the building on the front. So then that could add cost, because these units all have tubes, right, that go along the building for drainage and pumping and everything. And if you can't situate that right, then obviously you can't even make this improvement. And the whole value add strategy on the building comes down to getting rid of the very expensive heat bill, because even small improvements on stuff like that result in a lot of property value when you actually work it out. And I have to tell my team that all the time, like, hey, even if we save $20, that means that we've made a lot of money in property value. And especially when the goal is to refinance the money out, that's a very important step of this whole thing. But yeah, so permits, making sure this could be done to mitigate that sort of thing. I mean, just comes down to your due diligence period. Needed to make sure that we had a long enough due diligence period with a seller that would allow us to get into the property with the different contractors and stuff to evaluate this and make sure that it was feasible for them to do. In this particular building, we had done this project in the borough before, so we kind of knew that they would allow us to. But the first time we did a project like this, we had to call the borough, which is like the municipal government, and just make sure that they would let us do something like this. So that's one of the things, and how we mitigate that sort of thing. Additionally, a kind of risk on this property that we took, and just, I mean, to be honest, we decided we would just sort it out, is the seller didn't have all the leases for the tenants. The seller actually, during the whole process of this sale, ended up going to jail, and we had to negotiate buying the building while he was in jail. That's a whole nother
classic, man,
and everything. But
so wait, let's back up. Let's back up a little bit, okay? So if I heard you correctly, you said the seller actually went to jail.
Oh yeah,
during the transaction, man. So you got to share the story.
Oh yeah, so
I've been in some squirrely transactions, but no one has ever gone to jail yet during my transaction, man.
It was a mess. So basically, we went under contract on this. We got a pretty good deal, like price wise. I mean, we can create upwards of $400,000 worth of property value with our project just based on the market cap and where our numbers will be. But we were wondering, like, okay, well, why are we getting such a deal? We've done a few deals where we've been wondering this, and then later on, we always find out the true story. So it turns out that the guy.
Oh, that's good, man. You mean there are no accidents?
No, there's always some reason. And I mean,
usually not in commercial real estate.
Property was in rough shape, but like that can't be the only reason. So he ended up having he was going through a difficult time. He did something wrong, and he ended up getting sent to jail. And during that time, there was a span of, we were supposed to close, and maybe like 2 weeks before closing, no one could get in touch with the guy. So we didn't know what happened. We didn't know if he like disappeared or whatever.
What did you need from him? Did you need him to sign over the deed?
I tell people all the time, don't try to squeeze out a few pennies, because we were trying to negotiate a few last minute items for the occupancy for the building. It was like $5,000 worth of stuff.
My guess is, man, those items probably were like no more than like another $5,000, right? So you're gonna try to.
That's all it was. And
you're gonna try to squeeze $5,000 out and lose $400,000.
Well, obviously we didn't know he was going to jail, but
funny, man.
So then
I only laugh because I've done that before myself. One time I've learned.
Yeah, and it screws it up.
I've never done it again.
At this point, I just tell people like, hey, you'll figure it out. Don't worry about the small details. The small details you'll figure out. Whatever, just get it done. So he couldn't sign anything. So then we were
delayed. The small details really matter, but I think what you're saying is like, don't try to squeeze a penny to lose $1, right?
What is it, like trip over pennies to save $1 or something? I don't know, something like that. But 100%. But no. So then that happened, and then eventually he called us. We were able to get in touch with his lawyer because he had some other things going on at the time. And then what happens is when someone's in prison, you can't actually contact them. They can only contact you. So then we had to wait for like once a week or whatever his times were to get updates. And then he ended up getting moved from, this is all during COVID too. So there's all kinds of other restrictions with like, you can't go into the prison. He needs to have like a lawyer. Somebody needs to get a test to be able to go into the prison.
This is classic, man.
Oh yeah. Well, I guess it wasn't prison. He wasn't incarcerated. Like he was awaiting his case. So he was in like jail, whatever that. I never went to, I don't have experience. Incarceration system. But then he ended up getting like released to went to like the hospital for something, and then he had to then we had to like have a caseworker go meet him, and then we were ready to sort everything out, and then like 3 days before the caseworker was supposed to go in, the caseworker got COVID. So then it got pushed back again. And man,
it just keeps getting better. It keeps getting better.
Yeah, the thing that was supposed to take 2 months ended up taking, I don't know, it might have taken 6 months. And yeah, so then eventually he signed over power of attorney and we closed the building. But he ended up, I don't know I don't care what happened with his court case at this point, but something happened where he got released temporarily. I don't know, I guess he posted bail Again, my inexperience with the system, I don't know.
Okay,
but
so let me ask you a couple of questions. All right. So now let's start dialing this in and start talking about the things that actually made you money. So if you can do this over again, what would you do differently? Right. I mean, granted, this was kind of an unusual situation. No one can really predict that, your seller was going to go to jail and create a bunch of bottlenecks, right? But to some degree, though, you can predict how a transaction is going to go based on the conversations that you have on the front end. I mean, that's almost like 8 times out of 10. Okay, I can roughly gauge how long, based on the market, based on what's going on with financing and the capital markets, based on my conversation with the broker or the seller directly, I can kind of gauge if this is going to be a 60-day escrow that turns into a 90 or a 90 that turns into 120 days. I can kind of predict that stuff at this point, right? So looking back on this thing now, what did you learn? And what would you change? What would you do differently, man?
This specific situation, my group and I, my partners and I, we meet every week, and we all come from, I come from a quality background, they come from tech. So every time something doesn't go really according to plan, we think okay, well, what can we do differently to make sure that, I don't know, what can we prevent?
Best practice.
And to be honest, in this situation, it's already agreed up front that the seller takes care of their municipal requirements. So really, the seller would have had to fix all these things. That's kind of agreed up front on the paperwork. To sell the property, for the lien letters to sell the property to be released, they have to pass their occupancy inspection. So we were just trying to tell him, hey, don't delay things and get them fixed. Just give us $5,000 and we'll sign a form that says that we'll fix them after closing. It should have been fairly straightforward. It's already agreed that he's got to do the stuff anyway. We were just trying to speed things up. And obviously that all broke down. I can say that because there was some disagreement there, we probably should have just said, it benefits us to get this done now, because right now we're working on a project that involves HVAC in November, close to December. That's not the ideal time to do heating and cooling work. So really, we should have just got the deal done. We already had money we were doing a construction loan, part of the financing with the bank. So we already had money to do the project. We have our own handyman that could have done, we employ a handyman, so he could have just done 90% of these things for his hourly. That would have been easy. But we were just trying to get the money, because then we would have had to deal with it. So moving forward, the expediency of getting things done,
time is money, man,
should take priority over the little bit of cash there finagling. But after that point, there's nothing really. Just stay on the horse. That's all we had to do when I was in sales, because right after grad school I did laboratory sales, and some of the sales training, they said just stay on the horse. When you get in touch with somebody, just keep going, the next person, keep going, just don't get off, just keep going. And that's kind of where we were with this project. It was just reiterating just keep going with it. Eventually it'll sort itself out. And it did, but we could have saved ourselves a lot.
Man, that's a really big tip, okay, is stay on the horse. I actually like that. And I love the analogy, man, stay on the horse, right? I've never heard that, never used that, but I think I'm going to borrow that one from you. Stay on the horse.
Take it, it's fine.
But very true story, right? So I'm closing on a property this week, okay, that I've been follow up on with the lender every single day for nearly 45 days, okay? And I know for certain that if I didn't do that, I would likely have lost my rate lock, because we would have closed late. And not to mention that's getting into the holidays, and I don't want to be working on a deal, man, going into the holidays, right? But the biggest thing that I learned in 2008, okay, 2009, 2010, which was, I think, market that was a little bit more challenging to put financing together, is you have to stay on the horse, man. I like that. You got to stay on the horse.
Yeah.
Otherwise, and this market, though, it's the same thing, but a little bit different, right? Because lenders right now are so busy with refis that the banking world is very interesting, right? When people are flush with opportunity, just there's some complacency that sets into this environment, man, that just can bottleneck deals. And I just learned from that. And so it's interesting true. That you say that, right?
And it also comes back to being like a realtor too. Like when you combine my personal deals with my like realtor deals, I've done over 200 escrows now. And it's like every one that you do, other than an odd one here and there, something comes up and you just have to solve the problem. It could be financing. It could be municipal requirements. It could be somebody's just fickle and wishy-washy. All it takes is one person not doing their job, and you got problems. And the only way to deal with that is that's, like I said, you just stay on the horse. When it starts going poorly, you just, can't get all upset and give up. You just have to figure it out.
Stay on the horse. I really like that.
That's where we were with this one. I mean,
yeah. Well, man, I really appreciate the story, man. Well, we're approaching the end of the show, and I got to tell you, this has been one of the more interesting discussions that we've had. I've been involved in a lot of different transactions, but nothing where I can say the seller actually disappeared because wait, let me see.
Yeah.
No, actually, that's true. Yeah, and this was. I haven't been involved in a transaction like that. I've been involved in some others that were very interesting, but nothing.
We've had people have health problems before and like that.
Several times, man.
But you can at least still get in touch with somebody. This guy just disappeared. We didn't know if he went to Mexico or what he did. But I'm just glad we found him. I'm glad we got it done. But
I really appreciate the conversation, right? Because what that does is it really shares a very unique perspective, because things never go perfectly in this business, man. They just don't. But I think oftentimes what matters is how we're willing to approach those challenges when they happen, right? Things can go really, really smoothly if you stay on the horse.
Yeah.
Like you said, I really like that. But oftentimes there's just a lot of unpredictability in this business. And I think what adds value to the process is the buyer's ability to work through things as they pop up, right? I mean, that's just a huge component of that. So with that said, man, I want to thank you for being on. You've been a great guest. Great story. Love the story. Also, I love the big takeaway, and I'm never going to forget this one. Stay on the horse by my man, Anthony Angotti, man. That last name even matches that, doesn't it? Like, hey, stay on the horse, Angotti. It sounds like a Greek movie star, man, right? Like
Italian. The joke is that we didn't want to be associated with the Gotti crime.
That's funny. That's funny. Well, I saw the last name, but I figured, hey, I'm not going to bring that up. Hey, so I want to thank you, man, for being on. You've been really great guest. It's been a fun show. Also, some really good insight shared. Before I ask you, how do people get in touch with you, or the best way? What is the one question that you have for me that you feel can add some value to our audience?
Question I have for you. So I guess just, I throw this back at people because every time I do a podcast or something, people ask me a lot of times, like, what's advice you have somebody for that's just getting started, or what's something you would do differently when you got started? So then I'll just throw the question back to you. What's something that you would have done differently when you got started investing in real estate, based on where you are now? Yeah, sure.
Man, they're actually... Let's see. There are a couple, but I think the thing that I would have done differently that would have created the greatest impact, is I think it was in 2011 or 12. Maybe it was in 2011, but had an opportunity, man, to scale massively. And I chose not to go down that path. We still grew, but just not at that pace. And so in hindsight, if I could do it over again, knowing what I know today, I definitely would have taken that path and just restructured, I think, the opportunity a little bit, or the proposed opportunity. And I think I could have converted that to a considerable amount of value. But the reality though is it only would have made sense if I would have changed the deal a little bit, right? And it really came down to financing. Otherwise, it was just an average opportunity. But knowing what I know now, if I tweaked that a little bit and restructured it, I think it could have been very favorable, not only for what we're doing today, but also for the other parties involved as well. So that would have been a really big one.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think that kind of recognizing the opportunity cost with what you're doing, that's something that only comes with time and experience. And that's similar thing to when I answer that question. It's like mostly the opportunity cost type stuff that comes up.
Yeah, but it's kind of a catch-22 question, right? Because that opportunity wouldn't have been favorable even if I took it then. So that's why I didn't do it. But it would have been knowing what I know now and restructuring that to allow for the equity financing to be more favorable for growth, right? But great. I only understand that today. And with the information that I had, it was the right decision. I just could have restructured it to make it make sense, to make it worth the time and energy, right? And also the upside return. So good question, man. Yeah. Good question.
Yeah.
So, hey, buddy, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So people can find me, Bigger Pockets. They can follow me on Instagram at 412agent. And then I also do the podcast, as you mentioned, Be Free RE. The way our podcast works is people can call us and we answer their questions on the air. So the number's 412-212-8366. And we just ask people to leave their name, where they're calling from, and their question. And we answer them on the show. The more ridiculous the question, the better. We've had people talk about tenants putting fish in walls. We had somebody with like a crocodile pit story once, like all kinds of just crazy stuff. So the more ridiculous, the better. It's more fun that way.
Well, be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, exactly.
Be careful what you ask for, man. Well, Anthony, I really appreciate being on, bud. Thank you so much for your time and for being a great guest. And man, I want to wish you continued success, man.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Clarity of purpose creates our greatest competitive advantage. When we transform apartment buildings to thriving communities, we improve how people live and create assets with high profit margins. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this up with a friend. I'm John Brackett, bringing you things you can implement right away.